Welcome to a new episode of the World of Warcraft lore channel. In today's episode, we'll continue the Ulduar storyline and explore the Winterskorn Vrykul clan. If you enjoy this content, consider subscribing to the channel, as a new episode is released every Wednesday. So, sit back and relax, the new episode starts right now. For countless ages following Loken's treachery, the Titan Forged, banished from Ulduar, scattered across northern Kalimdor. The massive giants slowly made their way into the nearby mountains and seas, vanishing from view. The earthen delved deep into the world's depths, engaging in battles for control against brutish and deformed creatures known as trogs. After the conflict with the old gods, the Keepers utilized the Forge of Wills to craft new Titan Forge to aid in reshaping the world. However, their initial designs proved overly complex and ambitious. Instead of creating perfect servants, they gave rise to stone-skinned beings known as trogs, who were more primitive and unruly. Recognizing the need for refinement, the Keepers returned to the Forge. The next generation of Titan Forged that emerged from the Forge of Wills would become known as the Earthen. The Keepers were concerned about the trogs but couldn't bring themselves to destroy them. Instead, Ironea constructed a small underground vault called Uldaman, which served as a stasis chamber for the trogs. Some of these trogs managed to escape their confinement and roamed the newly ordered world, while others found their way into the elemental plane's domain of Earth, Deep Home. Many Vrykul stayed above ground, forming small clans, with some of these groups roaming the harsh northern landscape as nomads, while others settled in the forested tundra of the region. A fragile peace held among these groups of Titan Forged, but it was destined not to endure. Over time, malevolent forces sought to rule the lands once guarded by the Keepers. Among these forces were two of Loken's own creations, the savage fire giants Volkhan and Ignis. Volkhan and Ignis eyed the storm peaks encircling Ulduar as a prime land for conquest. However, to claim the region, they needed an army. So, the giants turned to the fierce Winterskorn clan of Vrykul. While many Vrykul tended to avoid direct conflicts, the Winterskorn were an exception. Their culture was steeped in violence and aggression, driven by the belief that they would one day ascend to the halls of valor. They thrived on conflict, be it within their own clan or against nearby Titan-forged groups. Volkhan and Ignis forcefully took command of the Winterskorn, fueling their thirst for battle. The giants strengthened the Vrykul's metal bodies with enchanted armor and crafted potent weapons designed to pierce the iron and stone skin of other Titan-forged. However, as this new army embarked on its grand conquest, anomalies began to surface within the Winterskorn. Their metallic skin grew fragile and weak, displaying the initial signs of the curse of flesh. Despite this setback, Volkhan and Ignis remained determined to continue their campaign. They also recognized that relying solely on the Winterskorn for victory was no longer viable. To bolster their forces, the giants shaped formidable molten golems and iron constructs of their own creation. The immense Winterskorn army advanced, targeting the peaceful Earthen by launching an assault on their underground homes. The Earthen were completely caught off guard, facing an overwhelming and highly organized force. Whole caverns were ravaged, with not a single living creature spared. A small group of survivors managed to escape the onslaught and sought aid from Tyr, Arcadus, and Ironea, who had managed to elude Loken's anger until then. Furious at what they learned, Tyr and his companions promptly journeyed to the Earthen's cavernous dwellings to assist their beleaguered fellow Titan-forged. Tyr himself led the bravest of the Earthen in skirmishes against the Winterskorn, while Arcadus and Ironea constructed defenses to thwart future attacks. Over time, the Earthen and their allies successfully pushed back the Winterskorn. However, Volkhan and Ignis, undeterred by their failed attempt to conquer the Storm Peaks, refused to admit defeat. They returned to their searing forges and crafted a new, even more formidable army. Not content with golems and constructs alone, Volkhan and Ignis fashioned enchanted snares to enslave entire groups of proto-dragons. These creatures weren't intended as mounts but as war beasts. The giants armed their winged servants with fiery weapons, intending to instill terror in the hearts of the Earthen. The following brutal Winterskorn assault shattered the Earthen's defenses, forcing them out of their sanctuary. The Earthen scattered throughout the icy mountain passes, but escape proved impossible. Vrykul and golems hunted the Earthen on the ground, while proto-dragons attacked from the skies. Even Tyr, Arcadus, and Ironea had to flee from the relentless fury of the Winterskorn. Realizing they couldn't defeat the Winterskorn on their own, Tyr called upon the 5 dragon aspects for aid. The noble aspects were infuriated upon seeing the numerous fallen Titan forged. Their anger only intensified upon learning that proto-dragons had been enslaved. Without hesitation, the aspects took to the skies and unleashed their powers on the ironclad Winterskorn. Much like their battle against Galakrond, the aspects joined forces to overwhelm the Vrykul army. Alexstrasza held the Winterskorn at bay with towering walls of enchanted fire. Malygos drained the magical essence that powered the constructs and golems, rendering them useless. He also shattered the enchanted snares binding the proto-dragons, setting the creatures free. Neltharion raised mountains from the earth to corral and contain the Vrykul and their giant masters. Finally, Ysera and Nozdormu combined their powers to create a spell that would decisively end the conflict. Ysera and Nozdormu enveloped the Winterskorn in a suffocating mist, causing the Titan forged to fall into a deep sleep. These incapacitated beings were then locked away in tomb cities scattered across northern Kalimdor. They wouldn't experience the peaceful slumber of the Emerald Dream but instead languish in a timeless, unconscious sleep for thousands upon thousands of years. In the millennia to come, the curse of flesh continued to warp the dormant Winterskorn Vrykul. When they eventually awoke, nearly every one of them would discover that they had transformed into mortal creatures made of flesh and blood. With the Winterskorn defeated, Keeper Tyr finally shifted his focus to Loken. He recognized that as long as Ulduar remained sealed, and the Titan Forged remained divided, more conflicts would arise. Tyr somberly concluded that without taking action against Loken, Azeroth would descend into a chaotic abyss of war. However, toppling Loken required meticulous planning. Tyr, along with his allies Arcadus and Ironea, determined that they needed to gather intelligence on Loken's activities. Their plan involved stealing the discs of NORGANNON from the heart of Ulduar, which had been recording all events on Azeroth, including Loken's betrayal. To have any hope of undoing the damage caused by his schemes, they needed to carefully study his actions. To claim the discs, Tyr devised a cunning plan and traveled to the gates of Ulduar. There, he called on Loken to surrender control of Ulduar for the greater good of Azeroth, threatening dire consequences if he refused. Loken emerged from the fortress, and a heated argument ensued, just as Tyr had hoped. While Loken was distracted, Arcadus and Ironea infiltrated and stole the discs of NORGANNON. Once they had secured the artifacts, Tyr and his companions escaped into the icy storm peaks. They knew that Loken would soon come after them, so they prepared to journey south in search of refuge to plan their next move. Before departing, Tyr and his allies gathered a significant number of Titan Forged who resided around Ulduar. This group included peaceful Vrykul afflicted by the curse of flesh, most surviving earthen, and many mechagnomes. Tyr, Arcadus, and Ironea viewed these Titan-forged as innocent victims of Loken's treachery and promised to find them a sanctuary before liberating Ulduar. The refugees embarked on a long journey, believing they had evaded Loken. However, when Loken discovered that the discs of Norgannon were missing, panic overtook him. If Tyr and his allies presented the artifacts to Algalon or the Pantheon, Loken's life would be in jeopardy. Desperate, he turned to the only beings he knew were powerful enough to stop Tyr and recover the discs. It was ancient Kothraxi monstrosities named Zakazj and Kithix. Zakazj and Kithix had once served as ruthless and cunning Kothraxi generals in the Black Empire. Long ago, the Keepers had sealed them and other Enraki away in underground chambers alongside the old gods. Loken excavated these Kothraxi tombs and awakened Zakazj and Kithix. He commanded the colossal abominations to eliminate Tyr and all who followed him. Sensing the influence of Yogg-Saron in Loken's mind, the two Kothraxi readily obeyed. In a tranquil and temperate glade far to the south, Zakazj and Kithix caught up to the fleeing Keepers and their followers. Fearing for the lives of his allies, Tyr ordered Arcadus and Ironea to lead the rest of the Titan-forged even farther south. Meanwhile, he prepared to confront the Kothraxi and hold them off for as long as possible. Only a faint remnant of Agramar's ancient power remained within Tyr's iron form, but his noble spirit remained unwavering. Tyr would not retreat, not when the lives of the innocent were at stake. In the midst of his struggle against the Kothraxi, torrents of arcane and shadow energy erupted within the once peaceful glade. The fierce battle between the Lone Keeper and the Kothraxi continued for 6 days and nights without respite. Throughout the relentless clash, Tyr held his ground, refusing to yield, but his adversaries were equally unyielding. As fatigue set in, Tyr made a solemn decision to sacrifice himself in order to shield his friends. He channeled all his remaining power into a final, blinding explosion of arcane energy that reverberated throughout the world. To the south, Arcadus and Ironea witnessed the eruption of magical energies lighting up the horizon. Once the volatile forces had subsided, the two Titan-forged returned to the battlefield. Within a massive crater crackling with arcane magic, they discovered the lifeless bodies of Tyr and Zakazj. Despite facing insurmountable odds, the Keeper of Justice had come close to defeating both Kothraxi. The survivor, Kithix, had barely escaped Tyr's vengeful onslaught. Severely wounded, Kithix fled blindly to the west, disappearing for many millennia. In tribute to their fallen comrade, Ironea named the area surrounding the crater Tyr's Fall, a name that translated to Tirisful in the Vrykul tongue. She and her followers buried Tyr and his vanquished foe where they had fallen, placing Tyr's massive silver hand atop his resting place as a memorial to his brave sacrifice. Although all the refugees carried forward the tale of Tyr's noble sacrifice, the Vrykul, in particular, felt compelled to do more. Moved by the Keeper's heroic deeds, they decided to settle at the battleground and stand vigil over Tyr's grave for the remainder of their days. Arcadus and Ironea honored the Vrykul's wish to establish their home in the land of Tirisful. The Keeper and the Giantess continued south, accompanied by the earthen and mechagnomes. They eventually arrived at the easternmost Titan-forged vault on Kalimdor, Uldaman. Arcadus and Ironea expanded the site, constructing new chambers to safeguard the discs of Norgannon. They vowed to protect the history of Azeroth with their lives if necessary. As years passed, some of the earthen began to display signs of the curse of flesh. Many among the Titan-forged feared that these effects would only worsen over time. They made a request to enter a state of hibernation, hoping that a cure might one day be discovered. Arcadus, promising to awaken them at a later time, consented to their plea. He sealed his followers within the extensive underground vaults of Uldaman. However, the Mechagnomes chose to remain awake. Despite knowing that the curse would eventually affect them as well, they valiantly pledged to safeguard Uldaman and maintain its marvelous machinery. In the distant Uldur, Loken grew desperate upon discovering that his Kothraxi had failed to eliminate his adversaries. He assumed that with the formidable tier deceased, Arcadus and Ironea would not dare to mount a direct assault on Uldur. Nevertheless, the existence of the discs of Norgannon still posed a threat to him. Stealing or destroying the artifacts was no longer a viable option, as Arcadus and Ironea could easily seal off Uldaman from intruders. Instead, Loken tried to substitute the discs of Norgannon with an archive of his own creation, which he named the Tribunal of Ages. In this new repository, he manipulated historical events to his liking and erased his own wrongdoings from the record. However, despite his belief in its success, his archive turned out to be deeply flawed. The stored histories were warped even beyond Loken's comprehension. Loken then resorted to one last drastic measure to prevent retribution from Arcadus and Ironea. He anticipated that his enemies might eventually summon the constellar Algalon. To prevent this, Loken tampered with the Titan communication devices in Uldur, ensuring that no living creature could contact Algalon. Only Loken's own demise would draw the Constellar to Azeroth. The Fallen Keeper was confident that, if it came to that, Arcadus and Ironea would be the ones responsible for his death, and he believed that Algalon would exact revenge on his behalf by exterminating all life on Azeroth's surface. While the Winterskorn slumbered in their deep vaults and many of the earthen remained sealed away for countless ages, their distinct cultures flourished and evolved in unique ways as they spread across the unforgiving northern lands. Among the most formidable clans to rise during this time was the Dragonflayer clan. Much like the Winterskorn, the Dragonflayers, a group of Vrykul, began to notice that their once iron hides were gradually transforming into flesh over time. Initially, clan leaders sought to compensate for their diminishing strength by enslaving ancient proto-dragons, similar to what the Winterskorn had done in earlier centuries. However, the Dragonflayers did not view the proto-dragons as mere tools of war. Instead, they forged a unique bond with these fearsome drakes, using them as hunting companions and riding them into battle. Over time, these proto-dragons became an integral part of the clan's culture and a vital weapon against the Vrykul's mortal enemies, a fierce race of bearmen known as the Jelger, who would eventually become the modern-day Furbolgs. Under the rule of King Imran, the Dragonflayer clan finally gained the upper hand against its adversaries. In a coordinated offensive, the Vrykul attacked and drove the Jelger into Kalimdor's lush central forests. Following this victory, tragedy struck as the Curse of Flesh took a new turn. Dragonflayer women began giving birth to small, deformed children, a development that spread fear and superstition throughout the clan. Some of the Vrykul even placed blame on Imran for this affliction, but the king held his own belief about who was responsible. In his mind, it was the mythical keepers who were behind the Curse of Flesh. The keepers, whom many Vrykul regarded as their godlike creators, had not been seen or heard from in generations. Imran convinced his people to renounce these silent and distant keepers, whom he believed had abandoned them to the Curse of Flesh. He promised to unite all Vrykul under his banner and, as his first decree, ordered his followers to cleanse the clan by destroying all of the malformed infants. Many of the Dragonflayers obeyed Imran's brutal orders, but some could not bring themselves to commit such a heinous act. They embarked on a quest to hide their stunted offspring in a place of legend, a land far to the south where a lost clan of Vrykul was said to have journeyed with Tyr, Arcadus, and Ironea. A number of dragonflayers ventured south, taking their diminutive newborns in search of this mythical refuge. Most were never heard from again, lost to the annals of time. However, a few did manage to find their way to this fabled land. With heavy hearts, they left their beloved sons and daughters in the care of the Vrykul who inhabited Tirisfal. In the ages that followed, these afflicted children and their descendants would continue to degenerate into mortal beings known as humans. This fate befell many other Titan-forged as well, including mechagnomes, Tolvir, Mogu, and giants. Only a handful of the Keeper's servants managed to resist the curse. Unintentionally, the curse of flesh weakened the Titan-forged as Yogg-Saron had hoped, but it also gave rise to qualities he had never anticipated: courage, determination, and heroism. Unaware that these potent traits would eventually shape the destiny of the world, Yogg-Saron and the other old gods focused on escaping their prisons. Achieving freedom would be a goal that would take thousands of years to accomplish. For now, more immediate dangers stirred in the lush heart of Kalimdor. A new power, a savage native race born in the early ages of the world, was on the rise. They called themselves trolls, and it wouldn't be long before they discovered the malevolent entities imprisoned beneath the earth. Thank you for listening to this story all the way to the end. If you enjoyed the episode and learned something interesting, please share your thoughts in the comments. I appreciate any feedback, as it's valuable to me. In conclusion, I'd like to remind you that you can revisit all episodes on Spotify. Until the next video, have a great time and enjoy the summer.